Welcome to day number 7 of the 1,000 words for 1,000 days. My name is Nick Sands. I did run into a bit of writer's block today. I started and stopped a half dozen articles, and at this point I've written almost 4,000 words without really saying anything. So I took to the internet to try and find some inspiration for today's article, when I stumbled upon an interesting question. What were the 7 video games that had the biggest influence on you growing up? I love this type of question for a few reasons. The biggest one is that I'm addicted to nostalgia and I yearn for a time when life wasn't such a bag of dicks. The other thing I love about this is that unlike the question of which game is the best, which does have some objective measurements to it, asking which one has the biggest effect on you completely opens it up. Everyone has at least one terrible game that had a massively oversized effect on their development. Maybe Moonwalker helped you get through your parents' divorce when you were a kid. Maybe your obsession with Shaq Fu somehow led to you losing your virginity. The possibilities are endless with something like this. Now, with that in mind, here's 1,000 words on the games that most influenced me. I'm not sure how many it'll take to get to 1,000 words, so I'm just going to keep going till I hit the mark. Also, they won't be in any real order, because there's really no apples-to-apples comparison on most of these. Duke Nukem being the first titty I ever saw, and the first time I ever heard profanity used for fun, was equally as transformative as playing Super Mario 64 with my dad. Maybe not equally as transformative, but still, it's very difficult to compare those two things. First on the list, Donkey Kong Country. Donkey Kong was one of my favorite games, and one of the first games I ever remember really playing in a way that was meaningful. My grandparents loved the Super Nintendo and were surprisingly good at it. While most memes were knitting sweaters, mine was learning how to get infinite lives in Super Mario World and attempting to speedrun Yoshi's Island before I even knew what speedrunning was. But their favorite game was Donkey Kong Country. In the summer, I would spend a lot of time over there while my parents were working, and usually my cousin Rick would be there too, and the four of us would spend hours playing this game. In one of the strangest associations my brain could possibly make, smelling a freshly lit cigarette will immediately bring the opening theme song to my mind. My grandparents smoked Marlboros, smoked them nonstop. I can remember when I was a kid, they would cash in all their Marlboro points, and so like in the middle of summer, all of the cousins and all of the kids would get would get like all this ridiculous Marlboro gear. I still have a Swiss Army knife that was a Marlboro Swiss Army knife that my meme and Pepe got me by cashing in their Marlboro points. And there was always the one kid in school who had like the Marlboro jacket. Or I guess they wouldn't even let you wear that in school now. But yeah, there was always like one real trashy kid with like a mullet who would wear a Marlboro jacket all winter because their parents wouldn't be able to afford to buy them a normal winter jacket. So they would get them the Marlboro pointed jacket. I can think of at least 3 kids I knew growing up who did that. Anyways, moving on. The next one up is World of Warcraft, also known as the Life Ruiner. I had played this game for a month or so when it first came out, but it didn't really stick. I didn't have the $15 a month to spend on a membership, so I just figured fuck it. Plus, I didn't like spending my limited time in 04 on the family computer for gaming when I could be using it to watch ungodly amounts of internet porn and snuff films like other children my age. The early internet was a very fucking weird place. And yeah, it was just porn and snuff films pretty much, and that's what everybody would watch. But I saw more beheading videos by like 8th grade than any normal person ever should probably in their entire life. In 2008, Wrath of the Lich King expansion pack was released. I would enter into a dark period of my life where I did very little except work and play WoW. Not even internet porn could capture my attention like a 50-man ICC raid. Anyone who doesn't think video games can be addictive really should have met 2010 Nick, who frequently lied to his friends, family, and job about where he was and what he was doing so that he could hide in his room and play World of Warcraft. My time with WoW ended when my girlfriend at the time got fed up with me ignoring her for days on end and gave me an ultimatum. It was her or my warrior, rogue, paladin, and priest. Pandaria had just been released like a month before that, so it was a pretty easy choice. Pandaria fucking sucked. However, if I had received this ultimatum during peak Wrath of the Lich King, it's very likely that my branch of the family tree would stop with me. I ended up marrying the girl who gave me that ultimatum, and she is now my wife. I don't even know how long we've been together at this point, like 13 years. We've been together fucking long. I'm old as shit. Speaking of wizards, The Immortal was a Sega Genesis classic that came out in 1990 when I was 3, where you played as a geriatric wizard who seemed to have almost no magic and died constantly. This was the first game I remember that had extremely gruesome violence. Like, more gruesome than you probably think the Sega Genesis is even capable of having. The death animations for the time were absolutely off the fucking wall. Giant worms would rise up out of the ground and grab you and slam you around and eat you with absolutely no warning. Like, half of the traps and stuff he would set off in that game, there was no warning for you. You just had to have you basically had to have memorized the map. Mushrooms would melt you into a puddle. Baby spiders would devour you. At one point, you have to shrink down to get through. I don't even remember what you have to get through, but if one of the trolls that you had to sneak past caught you, they would stomp on you like Ant-Man in Endgame, and then literally like drag their foot on the floor like they were trying to get dog shit off it. It was hilarious and, again, very gruesome. So you were supposed to be this wizard and you had this magic staff and everything, but you also just had like a big knife, and the knife was really the thing that did most of the killing for you. You almost really never used magic. He's a wizard. He should have magic. You'd think that he would be using his magic to fucking protect himself. But instead, he would just use good old-fashioned knifey, give you the old 1-2 in the guts. So the reason that this was a developmental milestone was not the gruesome deaths. This was a milestone because it was the first time I ever got away with lying or being deceitful as a child. So my brother was 10 years older than me. I was around 5 or 6 at the time, and the game was still in the house. We still had the Sega Genesis, and he had the Sega hooked up in our bedroom. He would let me play his Sega pretty much whenever I wanted. We shared a room at the time, and he had one box of games that he would leave next to the Sega that had like the normal games in it, and then, you know, like Sonic and all, like child-friendly games. And then he had a drawer that had any games I wasn't allowed to play. One of those was The Immortal. One night he went and slept at a friend's house, and I waited till my parents were asleep, and I played, and I went in his drawer and got the game and played The Immortal for the first time. I played it for about 5 minutes, and I swear to God I must have died 40 times. It was absurd. That game was absurdly hard, and there was no way to know what was going to kill you or how you would die. It was fucking wild. I remember you would get like right in the beginning, in the very first room that you played in, if you stepped on the wrong tile, a worm would come up and just eat you. And then there was a room that was next to that where you got a bag of spores. And if you tried to use the spores, it would say you can't use the spores on a tile. But in the next room, there was a spot where there was dirt, and you would you use the spores on the dirt, and the mushrooms would just pop up and you would die. They would melt you into a puddle, which is hilarious because there's no other use for the spores in the game. That was it. You could use the spores on that one area, and all they did was melt you. It was hilarious. Like, what a fucking troll. Anyways, I only played it for about 5-10 minutes. I got scared. I shut it off and put it away, and that was the first time I ever got away with being a liar. And I have been chasing that high ever since, and will continue to chase that high for the rest of my life, because I remember that being such a rush of adrenaline playing that stupid game. All right, last on today's list is Guerrilla War. And so, as a kid, the only thing I really knew about this game was it had guns and I was allowed to play it. And that was very rare. I didn't usually get to play games with guns. I don't know when it came out, but it came out for the Nintendo, the NES, the Famicom. What I didn't know at the time was that it was a video game where you were actually playing as Che Guevara and Fidel Castro, and the entire game was you overthrowing the Cuban government. And you even got to wear the beret and everything. What a wild time in video games. The two heroes of the game, Fidel and Che, were essentially unstoppable super soldiers who absolutely obliterated everybody in their path, You ride tanks, you shoot guns, you save women who are tied up. There's a whole minecart mission that was really fun. The reason that this is such a big game for me is it's the first game I ever beat by myself. I spent months playing it, an entire summer of overthrowing an oppressive government and saving chicks, and it was glorious to finally beat a full video game from start to finish. I had never done that with no help. That was the first video game I ever did, and it's also fun to bring up that game on Reddit or on Facebook when people say that politics don't belong in video games or that video games only just recently got political because I mean, it doesn't get much more political than that. All right, and that's the last of them for now. If this does well, I have plenty more core memories that revolve around video games that I'm sure I can unload. In the comments, let me know what games were the biggest influences for you. I will see you tomorrow for the next video. And if you're in the New Hampshire area, please feel free to reach out. I'd love to work with you, either collaborating on YouTube or if you are having a wedding or having an event, I would love to shoot that for you. I am a commercial videographer, so feel free to reach out. Okay. Bye.